I am here with the gravel version of the Ride1UP CF Racer 1, which has a carbon fiber frame and a price tag between $2,000 and $2,500. The entry point for a carbon fiber bike is often significantly higher, so did Ride1UP deliver a practical and affordable gravel e-bike? Let's take a ride and find out. Hey fellow e-bikers, I'm John with Electric Bike Report. Before we jump in, please make sure to hit that subscribe button as well as the bell icon. We release new e-bike reviews a couple times a week, so if you're in the market for one, we're here to help make that search a little bit easier. But back to the CF Racer 1, there's also a road version of the bike available with some differences in components and geometry, but we're only going to discuss the gravel version that we have here. Let's start off by talking price a little bit more. In our communication with Ride1UP, they made a direct comparison between this bike and the Topstone Neo SL2 from Cannondale, which is priced above $3,500 at the time we're filming, and it has an alloy frame. You can find non-electric carbon fiber gravel bikes in this price range, but in many cases a carbon fiber e-bike is likely going to run about double what the CF Racer costs, and sometimes way more than that. Now, carbon fiber seems to be a rising trend, so we expect costs to be coming down as manufacturing gets more efficient, but even so, that puts Ride1UP a little bit ahead of the curve. Carbon fiber is not just a buzz phrase though, it really does have some great benefits. First, in terms of weight, the CF Racer is a grand total of 29 pounds. In my testing, that translated to fast acceleration and great handling because I didn't have to fight against the weight of the bike. And second, there's no suspension here, but the frame has a little bit of flex to help absorb vibrations and bumps, so there's a bit more comfort here than there would be with a rigid alloy frame. On top of that, 29 pounds is pretty manageable for anyone needing to carry their bike up a flight of stairs, and it's also light enough to fit on a standard bike rack. The last major feature I want to discuss is the 250 watt rear hub motor made by Bafeng. It has a really great range of assist levels that go from subtle to powerful, and this is a class 3 e-bike, so the motor can help up to 28 miles per hour. The motor is also incredibly small and quiet, so aside from the display, there's not really anything that makes this stand out as an e-bike. Continuing with the rest of the specs and components though, the bike is powered by an internal 36 volt 252 watt hour battery with Samsung cells. There's a SRAM Rival 1 group set that includes a hydraulic disc brake system with 2 piston calipers and 160 millimeter rotors on both wheels, as well as an 11-speed drivetrain. The 42 tooth chainring is made by ProWheel and has 170 millimeter crank arms, but the derailleur is made by SRAM along with the 11 to 42 tooth cassette. The bike includes flat platform flange pedals and a Cell Royal Asphalt GF saddle, and then this version of the bike includes 700C by 40 millimeter Continental Terra Trail tires made specifically for dirt and gravel. Up in the cockpit, there's a custom monocoque or single-piece stem and handlebar unit with a 90 millimeter extension. The handlebars themselves vary with the 2 different frame sizes, and then again with either the road or gravel configuration. Ours has 420 millimeter bars with a 15-degree flare out to 487 millimeters on the drops, and the smaller frame size starts at 400 millimeters and flares out to 467 millimeters. There's a small VeloFox color display that's mounted in front of the stem, and then the rear brake lever includes a SRAM Rival double tap shifter. This single lever shifts both up and down depending on how you press it, so it can take some getting used to, but I really liked it once I got it figured out. You might notice that there are really no visible cables or wires anywhere. They're all internally routed. That does wonders for the visual element and the overall stealth factor of this bike, but it does have some potential trade-offs in terms of maintenance costs. Routine maintenance is super important, and normal things like replacing the headset bearings are gonna require additional steps. So if you're not doing the work yourself, just be aware that you're likely gonna be paying higher labor costs to cover the mechanic's additional time. But that aside, the last thing to talk about are the CF Racer's 2 color options. Our version of the bike is called Clouded Gray, but it also comes in a glossy rainbow black. So with all of that out of the way now, let's go see how the bike performed in our real world tests. In our first test, we measured the stopping power of the CF Racer's hydraulic disc brakes, and it did a solid job overall. We brought the bike up to 20 miles per hour before hitting the brakes, and then we measured the distance it took to come to a complete stop. One test isn't all that useful, so we did it 3 times and then calculated an average stopping distance of 23 feet 7 inches based on those results. I compared that average to other e-bikes we've tested with similar weight and hydraulic disc brake systems, which in most cases were city bikes. The average for that pool of other bikes was 22 feet 10 inches, so the CF Racer came in a little slower, but only by a few inches, and I think its aerodynamic riding position is probably the biggest contributing factor to that. Some of those other bikes had larger rotors, but they were also heavier, so I think the difference was pretty moot. The CF Racer's performance is well within the range we expect to see, and I thought the brakes did a great job when I tested the bike on some dirt and gravel roads. The area I was in wasn't very well maintained, so there were big rocks and washed out sections that I did my best to avoid, and these brakes kept my speed in check even when I was riding fast down a few steep hills. Overall, I think this is a great brake set that's really effective for practical use, but it was a little slower in our test, so I've got to give the bike an A- here overall. I took the CF Racer out for 2 speed tests, one on our local bike paths and the other on a dirt and gravel road. There was a pretty big difference in those results, so let's see what happened and then we can go over the numbers back here. All right, we are here to do a speed test on the CF Racer 1. Going here just with my own power, going around 14.5, 15 miles per hour. Yeah, all right, 14.5, let's go up to PS1. I'm trying to keep the same level of steady effort here. Feeling pretty subtle, and actually, I don't really even hear the motor, it's very quiet. So, shifted up a couple gears though, so there is something happening here. Looks like right around 17 miles per hour for this one. Let's go up to PS2. Feeling a little bit more power, which is different. It's, you know, it's not really, it doesn't feel like a push, it's just smoother and faster. All right, so we're going 19.4 miles per hour, looks like was the max. Let's go up to PS3. We will shift again. So, all right, 19.9, we made 20. Let's go to PS4. Okay, there's more power. The other 3 were very subtle, whereas this one, this is more what I expect from an e-bike. Feel a bit of a push, picking up a lot of speed, 24.5 miles per hour or so. We'll get around this bend and then I'll shift up. All right, PS5. And looks like right around 26 miles per hour. Yep, a little over. All right, we'll call our speed test there. All right, we are here for another speed test on the CF Racer1, this time in the dirt and gravel. So I'm going here with the pedal assist system turned off, kind of around 9 miles per hour, maybe a little over at times. But let's go ahead and go up to PAS1. And again, not really hearing or feeling much from the motor in this setting, very subtle. I'm gonna shift up a gear though, so I guess there's that. Going about 9.5, maybe a little over. Okay, let's go up to PAS2. Okay, definitely an easier experience here. I feel like I can confidently shift up a gear. Going about 10.5 here. Okay, let's go ahead and go up to PAS3 and shift up again. Definitely getting breezy here. You know, still feels like a normal bike, but just easier. Yeah. Getting, I think that was around 13.5 max there. Yeah, so let's go up to PAS4. And this is the point at which I think it starts feeling a lot more like an e-bike with that power kind of pushing you. So let's get through this area. But and I've got a bit of a headwind going on. All right, yeah, going about 14.5, 15 here in this setting. That's pretty comfortable. All the way up to 15.5. And then we'll finish things off in PAS5. Don't really want to go a whole lot faster, honestly, just with all the unpredictability out here. But this is a good section. Yeah, so that's, I think, a good spot for it. Right around 17 or a little above. We'll call that our second part of the speed test. And we'll bounce back to the studio. So on the paved bike path, I was going at a pretty good clip with no pedal assistance. My max there was 14.9 miles per hour. The motor was super subtle in PAS1, but I was able to hit 17 miles per hour. And then the ride got progressively easier in PAS2 and 3, where I hit 19.4 and 20 miles per hour, but it still felt really natural. In the higher settings, I could really feel that extra power from the motor, so I hit 24.6 in PAS4 and 26.1 in PAS5. My speeds on the dirt road were vastly different, both for the sake of safety and because of the added resistance from the rougher ground. I started off going 9.1 miles per hour to start, and then hit a max of 9.6 in PAS1. The increases in speed were really steady going up from there. I hit 11.2 in PAS2, 13.4 in PAS3, 15.5 in PAS4, and 17.3 miles per hour in PAS5. I have a couple of big takeaways from this test. First, the motor's output is limited in each pedal assist setting, but the bike's speeds are not. So even though there's a cadence sensor here, it felt a lot more natural and less like an on-off switch. Second, small changes in my pedaling seem to have a fairly big effect on my speed because of the lightweight frame. There was a little bit of a hiccup in my PAS3 result from the bike path, where I think these two things came into play, and I think the data from the gravel portion was a little bit more accurate. That data showed a completely steady increase in speed and power through the settings, which matched up more with how the bike felt. If you really like the feeling of riding an analog bike, I think the lower assist levels are gonna meet your needs, and if you prefer a super easy ride, the high assist settings are definitely not lacking in power. So I think the CF Racer earned a solid A in this test. Ride1UP advertises a range of 16 to 40 miles with the CF Racer's 252 watt-hour battery, and we tested that by riding in PAS1 and PAS5 until we ran out of charge to get a low and high-end bracket. Our results were 15.3 to 47.6 miles, which were on the mid to high end when compared to bikes we've tested with similar motor and battery specs. That shows that the CF Racer did a really great job in this test, and also that its advertisements were right on the money. There is one caveat: we do all of our testing on paved surfaces, so if you are a dedicated gravel rider, you'll likely find the battery running out a bit sooner. And of course, the higher the assist level that you use, the faster the battery will be depleted. Regardless, we think you're likely to get better range with the CF Racer than you would with similarly priced alloy gravel e-bikes just because of the super light carbon frame. Lower weight equals better efficiency, but the trade-off with this style of frame is limited battery size. There's nothing unusual here, but just be aware that as a super light, you're not gonna get 50 to 80 miles of range on a gravel ride. If you're the type of person who's training for a century ride and you want something for longer recovery day rides, we recommend looking at adding the optional range extender battery. Right now, Ride1UP offers one that was designed for their roadster, city, and gravel bike, but they are also working on one that matches this bike's aesthetic a little more. I don't think everyone will need the extra battery, but for about an extra $300, you can double this bike's range, and in terms of value, you're still looking at a cost that's well below what you're likely to find elsewhere. By the numbers, you'd likely get around 32 to 95 miles from one charge on paved surfaces, which I don't think anyone is going to complain about. As it is, there's one thing to keep in mind about this bike, which is that it functions really well as an analog bike if your battery dies while you're still out on a ride. Its weight below 30 pounds and its wide gearing range means that you don't need the battery in order to pedal. Overall, I think the CF Racer deserves high marks in this test, so I'm gonna give it a solid A. As usual, our tester Justin pedaled the CF Racer up the path at Hellhole Trail to see how it could do on a steep hill, and I think it did a great job for the style of bike that it is. Let's see how Justin's test went, and we'll talk about the results back here in the studio.
Okay, so we're in Hellhole with the Ride1UP CF Racer, and very excited to take this up the hill and see how it does. Ride1UP's like first carbon fiber gravel bike, and it's a rear hub motor that has a torque sensor and feels very natural, so very quiet. And we'll see how this does. So far I'm down to about 7 miles per hour. Yes, you know, I'm having to put power into the pedals. Torque sensor, you're gonna have to. I'm gonna be breathing more than some, but it's a gravel bike, so that's kind of what you want. I'll let you listen to the motor as I climb up this next section of the hill. So as you can probably not tell, because you can't hear it, the motor is very quiet. Power output, you know, it's not the most powerful motor. Yeah, it's not necessarily supposed to be, but I can feel it. The engagement feels very smooth, and you know, I've shifted once climbing this hill, going about 10 miles per hour now, got down to about 7 through the steep sections. Yeah, you can hear me breathing, but you can definitely, I mean, you kind of feel like you're superhuman climbing on this thing. So that was tons of fun. Let's go to the tape and see how it did.
So one correction there, Justin said a couple of times that there was a torque sensor on this bike, but it is just a cadence sensor. The combination of the motor's subtle power and its current-based programming gave it a pretty similar feel to a torque sensor. Plus, we had the bike before most of its specs were widely available. Obviously, Justin was breathing a little heavy there toward the end of the test, but he made it in good time for a bike with a 250 watt motor. The test took 1 minute and 48 seconds, and Justin's average speed was an even 10 miles per hour. Compared to other bikes we've tested, the CF Racer's results were more in line with what we usually see from a 350 watt motor, and its maximum output matches up pretty well too. Judging by its controller, this motor had a peak of 540 watts, and it produces a max of 42 Newton meters of torque, which is definitely on the high end for its nominal rating. The aerodynamic riding position likely gave the bike a little bit of an edge as well, since most of those other bikes were a little bit more upright. With all that in mind, this is intended to be more of a cyclist's bike. The motor can't do all of the work for you, and you will have to put in some effort, but it definitely makes the job easier. I've pedaled up hellhole on this bike and on another without a motor, and I can say that where the other one was like torture, I actually had a fun workout with the CF Racer. So big picture, I'll give it a solid A here. Some of the main contributing factors to the CF Racer's ride quality are its sizing and geometry, its carbon fiber frame, its tires, and its motor. So let's go back out in the desert to chat about those things, and then I'll expand on a few details back here in the studio.
All right, we are here to talk about ride quality on the CF Racer1, and this is the gravel version of the bike. There's also a road version, but we're kind of out here in the intended natural environment for this version of the bike. Regardless of which one you're looking at, the CF Racer comes in 2 frame sizes, and it fits riders from 5'3" up to 6'3". It's really important to find kind of that broad range that does fit you, because there's not a ton of adjustability here. You're pretty much limited to the rails on the saddle and then the seat post itself for your saddle height. With the sort of single piece stem and handlebar unit, you're not going to be able to really make any adjustments to handlebar height or reach without really replacing the whole stem and handlebar setup. There is a pretty aggressive forward lean on both versions of the bike, but you do have the drop bars, so you're not limited to kind of one placement. You can switch where your grip is and how your body position is. There's no suspension here. This is a rigid carbon frame and fork. I say that, but there is some give to the carbon fiber, and I think that does add to the overall quality of the ride in general. Just a little bit more maneuverable, a little lighter. But then the tires here, made by Continental, they are 700C by 40 millimeter, so kind of middle of the road in terms of gravel tires. So kind of a balance between maneuverability and stability, but honestly good traction out here, and I have them aired down a little bit, so again adding a little bit more cushion since there's no suspension. And then we'll talk about the motor. That is a 250 watt Bafeng rear hub with a cadence sensor, and honestly very subtle, smooth engagement. It feels pretty responsive, and it definitely has power levels that vary to give you a natural feeling ride where it just feels like a bike, but then up in the higher settings a little bit more like an e-bike. So we'll call it there, and we'll bounce back to the studio and talk a little bit more.
So I want to reiterate that the carbon fiber frame and fork are huge contributing factors to the bike's handling and the overall feel of the ride. Everyone has their preferences, of course, but I think there's something pretty cool that happens when you can barely even feel the weight of the bike beneath you. And compared to an alloy frame, the ride here is also noticeably smoother. Personally, the only change I'd make to this bike if it were mine would be to add a suspension seat post from someone like Redshift Sports. I'd probably do that on any gravel bike though, so that's not a knock on the CF Racer in particular, more just a comment for anyone like me who prefers as much comfort as you can get. Circling back to the sizing and fit though, there are definitely a few things to consider there. With just 2 frame sizes, the fit is pretty broad, and with the monocoque stem and handlebar, there's no real way to dial in the fit more precisely without significantly increasing cost. The fit here is decent for an entry-level bike, but we wouldn't mind seeing at least 3 frame sizes in the future for a little bit more of a dialed-in feel. One last thing to dive more into is the motor. I've talked about that quite a bit already, but I did really like the fact that there were lower levels where this felt more like an analog bike, and also a couple of higher power settings for a super relaxed and easy ride. I thought it was great that it could reach 28 miles per hour comfortably on paved surfaces, but that it also had a more controlled feel for riding off-road, as well as the power to back that up. I can't help but to keep coming back to the CF Racer 1's price. It's pretty impressive that Ride1UP was able to put together a bike with carbon fiber construction and a ton of quality name brand parts for such an affordable price. And overall, its performance was really solid, even if there are a few downsides that come with its design. If you're expecting a really dialed-in fit, you're probably gonna need to add some cost to replace the stem and handlebars, and the maintenance over time will likely add up more with the internally routed cables. But if you're looking to get into road or gravel cycling or trade in your analog bike without spending a premium up front, there's definitely a lot of potential here. To recap our test results, there's a great distribution of speed and power throughout the 5 assist settings, there's decent range for the specs, and the option to double your range with a secondary external battery. There's really solid climbing power for the specs as well, and also good braking performance. Overall, we think there's a lot of appeal here for budget-conscious shoppers, which is honestly just par for course with Ride1UP. We've been consistently impressed with their e-bikes, and the CF Racer 1 stays true to form, even if there is some room for improvement, which is always going to be the case with every bike. If you want to check out more of the differences between the road and gravel versions of the CF Racer, check out the link down in the video description, and you can also find a link to our written review that goes into more detail. If you decide to make a purchase, we ask that you use our affiliate link to let us know you found this review helpful. It won't increase your cost, but it will enable us to keep making high quality content. Please also be sure to like and subscribe, as that helps us reach new viewers, and feel free to drop us a line down in the comments. But thanks for watching. Again, I'm John with Electric Bike Report, and this is the Ride1UP CF Racer 1.